This is Paul, who was writing a letter to the Corinthians, and he says, "For you are still controlled by your sinful nature. You are jealous of one another and quarrel with each other. Doesn't that prove you are controlled by your sinful nature? Aren't you living like people of the world? When one of you says, 'I'm a follower of Paul,' and another says, 'I follow Apollos,' aren't you acting just like people of the world? After all, who is Apollos? Who is Paul? We are only God's servants through whom you believed and the good news. Each of us did the work the Lord gave us. I planted the seed in your hearts, and Apollos watered it. But it was good. It was God who made it grow. It's not important who does the planting or who does the watering. What's important is that God makes the seed grow. The one who plants and the one who waters work together with the same purpose, and both will be rewarded for their own hard work. For we are both God's workers, and you are God's field. You are God's building. Because of God's grace to me, I have laid the foundation like an expert builder. Now others are building on it. But whoever is building on this foundation must be very careful." I deliberately chose these two biblical characters to bring an analogy of this event today. Please understand this is an analogy and leave it at that. It is no coincidence that Professor Phineas Mohorosi Makurane, the founding Vice-Chancellor, is guest of honor today. You represent Paul today. You worked very hard and laid the foundation and did your part. Thank God he has kept you this far to witness your founding work. Your predecessor, the late Vice-Chancellor, Professor Lindela Ndlovu, the reason why we are gathered here is like Apollos. He took after you. He worked harder and improved this great work at NAST. Apollos was a great researcher as well. Prof. LRN will be remembered for his love of people and his legacy in encouraging everyone to do their part from the lowest leadership level to the sweeper, from the sweeper to the senior lecturer. And today, Baba Professor Sibanda, this history of NAST will record that at some point in time in the life of NAST, you were acting Vice-Chancellor and you brought peace to a ship that was capsizing. You brought us together and united us to do the work of NAST. Thank you. Psalm 133 tells us that where there is unity, God commands a blessing. We are witnessing this blessing today. We praise God together and look forward to the prosperity of NAST. Finally, like Apollos, who in my analogy is represented by the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu, he never wanted credit to himself, but as expressed by Paul, he said, God gave the increase. Kurane did his part, Ubaba Ndlovu did his part, and God gave the increase. As those that continue to build, let us remember the solid foundation that is at NAST. As we remember the works of the late professor, we say, may his soul rest in peace. Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we are here gathered today to commemorate the academic legacy of a researcher, of a man who loved his people. Father, we thank you that, my God, even today as we take time to just remember his works, to just remember who he was, this same spirit of unity will continue to bind us together as sons and daughters at NAST. We thank you for this day. Bless each and every segment of this program today. And we speak a blessing upon each and everything that's going to take place in this place. In all this, we ask it in the precious name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
You see, I know that generally men who don't frequent church as much as ladies wanted to clap hands. You don't clap hands after amen. But I can now command you to clap your hands as we move on to the next program item. You see, we thank you, Pastor Dube, for being brief, short, and to the point. Unlike this pastor who used to preach for 2 hours, 3 hours every service. Then one morning, the congregation decides to boycott because the services are too long. And the message to boycott missed one farmer. The farmer came alone and he waited and waited and waited. So the pastor calls and says, hey, the people are not here. We've been waiting now for more than 40 minutes and they're not here. What do we do? He says, Pastor, I'm not a pastor, I'm a farmer. If I promise my cows some hay, and some of them don't turn up, those that come will get the hay. So he gets the message, says, okay, let's begin the service. And he goes on for 4 hours preaching. At the end of the service, he goes to the farmer again and says, how was the service? He says, Pastor, I told you I'm not a pastor, I'm just a farmer. If I promise my cows some hay and only one cow comes, I don't give it the whole load. I just give it a small portion suitable for it. He got the message. I'll now call upon Professor Sibanda to give a word of welcome. Please clap hands for him. Sorry, is there?
Thank you, Mr. Moyo. Firstly, I would like to recognize the family of the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu, relatives, colleagues, and friends of the late Professor Ndlovu. The guest of honor, the former Vice Chancellor of NAST, Professor P.M. Makurane. Members from the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development who are here today. Former members of the NAST Council here present, Vice Chancellors of other universities here present, Acting Pro-Vice Chancellor of NAST, Dr. DJ Hlachwayo, Principal Officers at NAST and their deputies, Deans of faculties at NAST and directors of various units at NAST, former students of the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu, academic and non-academic members of staff at NAST here present, students at NAST, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. Good morning to everybody. That's much better. On behalf of the National University of Science and Technology family, I welcome you all to this special occasion where we are celebrating the academic legacy of the former Vice Chancellor of NAST, the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu. We are gathered here to celebrate and honor an academic and a scholar par excellence. My working relationship with Lindela goes as far back as the University of Zimbabwe, where we were both lecturers. And it is interesting to note that during the early part of our careers, we were both grantees of the same organization, the International Foundation for Science. And I'm sure that some speakers will cover his working life at the University of Zimbabwe. My recollection of his research activities was that he was one guy in the Faculty of Agriculture at the time who had a number of cows that carried rubber stoppers on their backs. I'm sure that those in the field of animal science know what that was about. But as a chemist, I was intrigued by his experiments. However, prior to this, I had known Lindela since 1970, when I was doing teaching practice from the then Gwelo Teachers College, and he was a Form 3 student at Mzingwane Secondary School. What was notable about Lindela at the time was that if he was not in class, he spent most of his time washing glassware, in quotation marks, in the laboratory. I interacted with him through sports. I took his class for swimming lessons. This is an area where Lindela excelled. When he got into the swimming pool, it was like a duck taking to water. As a result of his excellency in swimming, he was given a nickname relating to his outstanding performance in the swimming pool. It is rather ironic that his love for water as a swimmer extended to his love for the other liquid in later life. 8 years later, we met in London, this time both of us as students. He was studying in Wales, and I was in Hertfordshire. Coming back home, relating to his working life at NUST, the late professor joined NUST in April 2001 as Pro-Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Research and Consultancy Services, a position he held until September 2005, when he was appointed the second Vice Chancellor of NUST, replacing Professor Makurane, the first Vice Chancellor of the National University of Science and Technology, who was retiring that same year. And it is befitting that Professor Makurane should be here today as the guest speaker at this special occasion. The late Professor Ndlovu had served as Vice Chancellor of NUST for 2 full terms when his third contract was not renewed at the beginning of November 2015. The rest of his life after that is now history. With those few words, ladies and gentlemen, I wish us all a fruitful celebration on the life and legacy of Professor Lindela Ndlovu, and may his soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sibanda. Our applause was not loud enough. Can we give a bigger applause? You see, I know that many of you did not know that Professor Sibanda was Professor Ndlovu's teacher in early life. I discovered that, I think like what, within 6 months when he became Pro-Vice Chancellor to Professor Lindela Ndlovu. I discovered that. And you can see how people's lives are related and intertwined in the journey of life. I'll now call upon V.A. Mkandla to speak on behalf of Friends of LR. V.A. Mkandla.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, so we're quiet about it. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I thought we had a celebration rather than the other way around. Please forgive me if I stammer a bit, because I'm no longer used to addressing people. I'm so much used now to negotiating deals, financial deals, and trying to make money. So I've lost that skill of addressing individuals. Nonetheless, my brief on the prof maybe goes like, well, with us, I'll talk as a friend, most mainly, our contact, or should I say the curtain opens about 1968 at high school. I was in Form 3 then when he joined in Form 1. Well, I don't know how we just came to be together and find ourselves literally friends and working together most of the time. But it so happened just that way. One important thing I noticed about him then, he was very good at his English. Even as his seniors at times will ask him for certain verbs and clauses here and there. But fortunately for me, when it came to mathematics, he used to come to me also and ask a few things. But it was a wonderful experience together at school. Well, for 2 years, then we parted company. I went to Fletcher High School, I left him behind. When he completed, he went to Koromonzi High. We used to meet in Harare because university used to close after the schools had. So at times we'd meet when they were on their way back to Bulawayo. Well, when he completed at Koromonzi, he then left for West Africa. I think in Jala University, where he did his first degree. He was there for the first degree. When he completed, he then left for the UK, as already mentioned, Wales, where he did his agricultural science. Well, I used to ask him how things were like out there, and then he would tell us, of course. But one interesting one was, as already mentioned, his experiments with animals. Somebody was telling me that, most of the time you'll be following them, even in the grazing. Usually you'll puncture them somewhere by the side stomach here, so that they can test the level of metabolism going on there, especially the digestive system, and therefore how much energy was being absorbed for the animals to grow. That's how interesting the science was. He came back, I think 80. Then we joined company. He taught very briefly at St. Bernard's High School. When we said to him, well, find a job for now. So he went to St. Bernard's High School as a science teacher there. I think it didn't stay long. Then he won a scholarship. I'm not so sure whether it was a government to government, but to go to Gulf, or is it Guelph University in Canada. We stayed in contact, of course, through correspondence, writing each other when he was out there. He stayed, did his PhD, following his MPhil. I think some people normally do the master's taught, but I think he did an MPhil, then he went for a PhD. I remember at the airport, we accompanied him to the airport here. One friend saying to him, as we were parting company, Lindela nasi 20 cents, hambuza gatuchova pambi. Ama combis were 20 cents then. So, then from Canada, he came back, ZUZ absorbed him. Faculty of Agriculture, and he worked there through the system until he became the chairman of animal science. Then after that, he acted as a dean very briefly, then became the dean of Faculty of Agriculture. At that stage, eventually, I can't remember the date exactly, but I think 2000 or 2001, then he became professor. I remember attending his inaugural lecture. I was in Harare as well with him that time. Attending his inaugural lecture, it was a well-presented one, typical animal science, where we measure urine and see how much energy is lost or how much material is being lost through this process and that process. Well, we understood some of the stuff. We didn't understand maybe most of it. But on our part, we took him to task actually about animals like cattle. We said, why can't mankind get rid of the cow? The cow destroys land. Environmentalists in particular, that we were then, were eager to ensure that our environment is kept. Rills and gullies were causing a lot of trouble. Well, he managed to defend it, to defend himself with respect to that one. If I could just say a bit more then about his professional life, really. Well, personally, I found him to be a very hard-working man. Most of the time, I think hard-working and then intrinsically driven. I don't think there was any desire on his part, maybe for extrinsic stuff, but really most of the time he was in the office, working, especially when he became dean. I remember, I think twice almost, I spent the whole day in his office because, well, I was there at the time, I didn't have anywhere to go. And he was busy working, answering this, responding to that mail or that correspondence, and so on. I also attended, like I've mentioned, this inaugural lecture, professorship, and then it had been going on, but I think his interest in research had grown. In terms of research, around here, he had the Guyu God Project. I remember when we used to go there at times just to see how the project was going with the community. Then at the Matopos, he was also involved. There they were researching to produce or to make a plow that will need minimum draft power. I don't know how far that project went, but I remember him telling me that they were working on something along those lines. We know also that eventually he was made the chairman of the cold storage company. I remember when I heard this one on the news, I phoned him. And I said to him, hey, you have been made chairman. The cold storage company was facing a lot of problems then. And then he responded and said to me, so, well, I remember chatting about this one later. there was a problem, of course. One of the recommendations that they were making to revive that company was maybe doing away or closing down a lot of these abattoirs that had mushroomed. And both of us knew that was a tall order, maybe something that will not happen because of the interests of other players in the market. He was also a writer. Apart from contributing to books, chapters to books, most of the time in collaboration with others, they will produce booklets in agriculture. I remember seeing some of them. In addition to his own writing, I must say he also assisted me because I grew some interest in writing. So at times we'll consult each other, I'll consult him, he will assist me how to go about this, how to do this. Maybe some people in here could have used my books without knowing who the author was. Well, maybe now you know. One of them really was to do with teacher training, which at the moment is also still being used, but not much of it. I had a visit to Israel, the nation Israel as we know it. And my going there really was because of courtesy of him. I had visited him by his office here. Then he just picked up some pamphlet from the Israeli embassy. He says, are you not interested in this? It was something on environmental issues. So he gave me, I applied everything. And then eventually I succeeded. The Israeli government, or the Mashav, on the Mashav program, one of the Mashav programs, then I went there. I was there for about 6 weeks. Quite a healthy experience, I must say. So at least I saw Jerusalem, the old city. I saw Golgotha. I saw Jesus' grave. You name it. We were there, Sea of Galilee. We even fetched some water there. I even went to the Dead Sea, and we were floating at the Dead Sea. Remember, the Dead Sea, you don't sink. So we're floating and floating most of the time there. We even came to southern Israel, around the Negev desert. So those were some of my contacts with him, experiences with him. I'm sure there's a lot more, except that perhaps we don't capture these things when they happen, and we always take it that, well, everything is okay. As already mentioned, Ndlovu had a social life. If I can say about his social life, well, we always say to him, he was well-traveled. I'm not so sure there's a continent he was never in, or yet never was. At times, I remember we were even saying to him, you have even been to Papua New Guinea, of all places. Where do we find that? But yet, he was well-traveled indeed. Ndlovu enjoyed partying. After work, when all is said and done, he enjoyed that one. Maybe we were the same, all of us. We enjoyed partying. So we used to go together to multiple places. We could even drive as far as Kwanda or Escotini. This side then did not have pleasure places. So most of our time was spent going in this direction. Gweru, Harare, times we'll just drive there, go and enjoy ourselves. We used to say to him, well, I think you picked up the habit from West Africa, because he was telling us how in West Africa they were doing a lot of partying. And then he picked it up. UK, I think, added to it. Because in UK, we're told parties used to start about 11:30 in the evening. Then it would be evening, especially in the summertime. 11:30, going on until 4 a.m., which would be almost morning. Well, then came UZ. UZ was another area of great partying. I think at this stage comes in Dumisani Vuma, whom most of us know. Then a contrast of characters was Dumisani was very volatile, whereas Ndlovu was a very serene and quiet somebody. But the two of them became very close friends. I used to meet them most of the time I went to Harare. One important thing there were a small group of about 6 or so. Here in Bulawayo, we used to have a grouping called Mtala, where we cooked meat and did anything, right out at late J. Timber's shops in Lubeve. So they've started something similar the other end. And the problem with them, though, was that half the time, some of the guys, they were so volatile, half the time they were fighting. But Lindela was never part of that fighting. So that's how the social life was going. The only other thing I found with them, though, in Harare was that most of the time they were broke. Whenever I got there, I found them broke. And I would always at one stage I even asked them, why is it you guys, when I come here, I find you broke? But I would always invite them, inviting them to the senior common room, as opposed to them inviting me to the senior common room there. At this stage again came his marriage. Dr. Lindela Ndlovu, I think she came along. I was the best man there. I married the two of them, and we were very close most of the time. When I was in Harare times, I would stay with them. Although eventually I found my own accommodation in town because I was working at head office then. Well, philosophically, I would say we were interacting. We discussed philosophical issues, and one of them was religion. Both of us, I think, were quite atheist then. Before me turned religious or Christian, we were atheists then. But I remember him telling me very strongly about Buddhism. That Buddhism is perhaps the best religion. He feels it touches the soul. It goes really to the heart of the believer. Well, I couldn't argue much because I really didn't know much about Buddhism. But those who know about Buddhism, maybe you could pick up the story from there. Well, education as well, because both of us were educationists. Remembering him at his, was it coronation? What word should I use? When he was appointed vice chancellor here, he invited me. I was present, and I remember him mentioning very well that when he talks about education issues, those are issues that he enjoys the most. Even in Harare, he used to say so to others, that, well, he enjoys his job. Hence, I mentioned intrinsic motivation earlier on. Well, here, we used to say, well, on my part, I would always say to him, I'm not happy about the education, the nature of the education. I think it's too bookish, it's too, well, people don't learn the skills that really should go and enable us to work out there. Initially, he used to defend it and tell me that university education is meant really to be academic and proceed that way. But of course, later on in life, I think we're kind of coming together. Maybe to conclude, just a few virtues then about this great man. He was our friend, advising us most of the time, but I found that one of his major social skills really was nonviolent communication. I think he cherished that one very well. It was rare to see him angry and actually threatening anyone. Whenever that happened, he will always be the go-between. So issues of goodwill and trust were part of his way of life. And then, of course, issues of questioning. I think those that have survived, lived with him, Ndlovu used to question a lot of things. It didn't matter whether it was working normally, but usually we'll just raise some questions there. And we'll ask him to answer them. If he does answer them, fine. But half the time, if you ask him something, he'll an opinion on something to be done, he will always answer you and say, "Manje uthi." So, but otherwise, we cherish his level of questioning. Personally, I always valued it so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my story. I won't come into NAST when we're here, because I think that's the story for most other people. I thought I'll just look at what went on way before maybe my arrival here as well. Thank you very much.
All we can say, Vincent, is that now we know. You see, they say success is relative. The bigger the success, the more the relatives. When you're successful, you tend to have many relatives. Now I know. Maybe I can also say how I'm related to him. We share the same star. We're both Sagittarians. How did I discover? I discovered this when I accompanied him to some office and they needed his ID. And I looked at it and I saw that I was born on 16 December 1953. He was born like a week or so after me. Do you remember his date of birth? Something December, what is it? 27 December 1953, so I was like 2 weeks older than him or something like that. So we shared the same star. That's why I say success is relative. The bigger the success, the more the relatives. And on religion, I remember when we were in Denmark together attending a conference, I saw on the list of attendees somebody called Jesus something. And I pointed out to him and said, you know these people, this is sacrilegious what they are doing. They have somebody called Jesus. He looked at me and said, yeah, it's a common name here. You can have your son called Jesus. It's just a name. I was worried that whole night because I started asking myself that at home, if you call your child Jesus, can you survive? The pastors and everybody would come and burn your house. Who are you to say you have a child called Jesus? What nonsense is that? Can I now call upon Miss Kathy Matsika to speak on behalf of his colleagues? Umkati, can somebody from Umkati come and see me so that we arrange your entry after her speech? Umkati, Likona. Umkati, somebody, lingemuva ngapha. All right, I'll call you. Now I know you are there. That's okay.
Are you sure the microphone is tall enough for me?
I will try. Let's see. Try.
Okay. I think it's okay now. I always fall back on issues that I know best. In my culture, Shona, there is a category on functions like this one, funerals, memorials, or anything to do with the late. There is usually a category of mourners called Masawira. Right? You know that? Does anybody know about Masawira? Normally, they have a license to say things that are at a funeral wake or at a memorial. They would normally be maybe dressed in the clothes of the late and doing things to remind people of what the late used to be. I told Professor Makurani that I'm tempted to take the gown outside the Vice Chancellor's gown. And when I speak, I would want to wear it. As today, we are remembering LR as the Vice Chancellor. And I think I fit the description of people that would probably call themselves Sawira, or I'm self-appointed Sawira of the late Vice Chancellor. But with your permission, I would just want to remind you of one signature thing. I shall wear my glasses on the head. And with that, I feel very comfortable now to talk about Lindela. I would like to start off by addressing the family. I would like to start by expressing our heartfelt sympathy. It might be late, but I think you can still take it. Our heartfelt sympathy and deep sorrow at the passing of our beloved former Vice Chancellor and cherished colleague. His former colleagues at NAST were devastated by his sudden passing. We would have loved to see him grow old into an old professor, as a Totobe, correct? And then we could be running to his house, to his office, to his wherever, to ask him for advice as an old professor. We have Professor Makurani. We do. We still love to see him around us. We would have loved to see Lindela around us as a senior professor, but it wasn't to be. We would have loved to see him grow into an old professor. We loved him for the many roles he played at NAST. I will try and revisit some of the most cherished moments we remember from his many years as VC. Who was the man at NAST to us, his colleagues? Well, to his colleagues at NAST, the late was many things. True, he was VC and boss, but it is equally true that he was a dear friend to all of us. We heard from Kandla, we heard from many others that he was a friendly man. You hardly ever found him cross. And if you found him quiet and you said, "Ow, Katisekuten," then he would light up, always with a smile. He was a friendly boss, and we loved that. He was a prolific researcher in academic excellence. For the record, he is amongst the highest individual contributors of items to the NAST institutional repository. Today, he stands at 1,156 citations on Google Scholar, and he has 139 articles featured there. And I think that deserves a pam-pam. He was an advisor to many of us. I think I am one of them that knew Lindela from many years ago. And many years ago include UZ. We worked at UZ and overlapped for almost 10 years with Lindela. And we did have some of the fun together. I called him Makelwan, as most of you know. He was my Makelwan. And it almost became a semi-official salutation in corridors at NAST when you said, "Katu Makelwan ungapi," they know whom I'm talking about. And they knew who Makelwan was. And it was because of those years when we were at UZ, we were wardens in the student residences. I was a warden at Swinton. He was a warden at Complex 4. And Vuma, who's was one of his close friends, was a warden at Manfred Hodgson. And Manfred Hodgson was my neighbor, but he was a neighbor of Vuma. And so started the link of the Makelwanes and the residences. So to us at NAST, that person that I identified, and I think almost all the members of his team, management team as well, found he had a relationship. He created relationships that lasted. But as an advisor to many of us, we were new, some of us, into senior administration, and he had lots of experience from his previous years as administrator and senior academic. So, as a team leader, he cherished the status of Bralins. Bralins was the name that he would give you if we went away on a retreat as senior members of staff. When you are introducing yourselves and saying, you would be the one to introduce himself, and you say, I am Lindela Ndlovu. But for purposes of this session, if you are in Victoria Falls or whatever, you can call me Bralins. Bralins being brother Lindela. But he would tell you quickly, it will end as soon as the seminar ends. When we go back, I am Professor Ndlovu. So Bralins enjoyed that status. And when in non-formal settings and on retreats, he really wanted to be part of the group. As I said before, I called him Makelwane. Others called him Lindela. And I'm talking about his team, his colleagues at NAST. Others called him Lindela. Others called him LR. Others called him Baba Ndlovu. Others called him Ubra, despite the ban that he doesn't want to be called Bralins at NAST. But he was still a brother to many. This certainly made him one of us and brought him closer to his team at NAST. We certainly miss that, and we wish that he would have lasted longer, but his term of office ended. He was the Vice Chancellor and our boss, who certainly called the shots and inspired many of us for more than 10 years. Leading NAST during the years of inflation was a challenge. Yet, LR worked tirelessly to keep NAST open, despite the harsh economic environment. I just want to remind my colleagues, you remember how the buses used to go all over town, to the townships, to all the suburban areas, to pick and drop stuff. It was expensive, but he believed it had to be done for the sake of the students and the welfare of staff who needed a salary at that time for their survival. He continually reminded us that we could not afford to let these students down. They too needed a future. So he tried to keep NAST open. And we did manage to keep NAST open throughout that period. Who amongst us, NAST employees, would forget 2009 and 2010 and that phrase, the window? We had window and window. I don't have time to explain. But all it was he devised a system where members of staff were given some money every Friday afternoon to enable members of staff to come to work and to have enough money to buy groceries. I think it was a great plan to support staff and make sure NAST remained open. It was the best thing then that happened at NAST and in Bulawayo, because the economy benefited. If NAST, with the big population of employees, was paid every week with that little amount, whatever it was, at most I think it was $100, and going downwards to everybody at NAST, it meant the economy in Bulawayo did pick up. People could go and buy groceries. And do we remember, it was during Lindela that we had those buses going down to Byte Bridge, taking members of staff to do shopping with that window money to make sure the families were happier. Again, it was a way of trying to make sure that the institution opened. He cared. The institution remained open, and staff remained happy, and students continued to get access to education. In terms of leadership, he provided leadership and guidance that saw NAST excel to greater heights and became a leading institution that it is today. NAST grew in numbers as well as in stature, and for that we give credit to the late Vice Chancellor's inspiring leadership. He certainly led by example, drawing from his many years of experience as an administrator and his unquestionable credentials in academia. He inspired many who today are successful vice chancellors and leaders in universities in Zimbabwe and elsewhere. Hello, QC, are you here? QC from it. Hello, Kuipa, are you here? From Lupane. Hello, Mandiweni, are you here? Hello, Eddie, are you there? And these are just a few of the many people that I think were inspired by the leadership of the late. Team building. As colleagues, we would like to acknowledge his all-embracing approach in team building. His efforts paid off. His approach made dialogue with all levels of staff possible. Lindela cared about all levels of staff. His passion for staff sports is well documented. He supported staff participation in university games, both locally and in the region, even when resources were depleted. I remember he would say to the BESA, these games have to be done, look for the money. Felix, you have to look for the money. These games have to be held. And he would have finished. And for sure, they would run around, and he is here to witness. You would run around the industry, around everybody, and get donations in kind and in money to make sure that some of the games, sports games for the staff, were held. There had to be money available to support the annual Vice Chancellor's Games, held a day after graduation. Without fail, LR would be there at the sports field, cheering on the runners, the netballers, the volleyball, the soccer, and the tug of war, which was the highlight of the day. There was always a challenge that he should also go and join one of the groups, and I would be on the other side. But we never did. We never seriously took the challenge up, but it was always a day of celebration for staff. These teams would be made up of administrators, academics, junior and senior non-teaching staff, and students, all celebrating a successful academic event, graduation. At the end of the sports day, LR presided over the presentation of tokens to winners, as well as enjoy the part that followed at the end. It was the laughter and small talk, mixing and mingling with staff of all levels that made him the darling of all levels of staff at NAST. He was caring. He cared about the staff welfare at NAST. The Senior Common Room project at NAST was driven from the Vice Chancellor's office, and he personally superintended over the project until it materialized. Indeed, by the time of his departure from NAST, staff had a decent club where they could get food, relax, and socialize on campus. Well, I could go on. As a colleague and a good Makelwane of Lindela, I would like to share with the family, friends, and colleagues of LR to hear today this short verse from Ecclesiastes 3, and it's verses 1 to 8. The verse reads, "Everything on earth has its own time and season. There is time for birth and death, planting and reaping, crying and laughing, embracing and parting, finding and losing, tearing and sowing, love and hate, war and peace. Everything has its own time." Professor Ndlovu's time came on 18 November 2015. He answered the call and chose to rest. His colleagues at NAST have happy memories, and we are grateful that we had an opportunity to be part of his illustrious life. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, with a K. As you heard that he used what we call in communication appropriate register. At a conference, I'm Pralins. When we leave this place, I'm Professor Ndlovu. That's how he was. You know, appropriate register simply means that if you want to tell somebody that you are going to Harare, you don't say the same way when you're talking to your father, or when you're talking to your pastor, or when you're talking to your child. The words you use, the tone, the speed of speaking is different. That's what we call appropriate register. For me, I'll tell you that the past 3 years when he was in office, maybe 3.5 years, he always wrote me messages when he wanted to discuss something with me. And it always began with Baba Moyo. This. And when we discuss, at the end he says, Kulungile Baba Moyo. I have my old cell phone handset. I'm keeping it. Those messages are still as they are. Just last week, I was going through them when I was preparing for this to see what I can remember. And I read through long conversations that we were having. And almost all of them would begin with Baba Moyo and end with Kulungile Baba Moyo. So that's the Mkati. Izandla. Well, Eslobela, that's where I come from. So you should know where this song was composed. It was composed Eslobela. Maybe I was involved. But you see, one thing that I want to say, which Professor Lindela Ndlovu also sometimes would make reference to. Did you see these fellows betwelling ndugu? Sticks and noble carries, did you see that? When I was young, I remember my grandfather asking a question that the new law was saying it is illegal to carry a noble carry. And the people felt that was the symbol of life, that you are alive, you carry a noble carry. And the people who were telling him, because he was a chief, were telling him that your people should not carry noble carries, had guns on their waists. They were carrying guns, and they didn't want the people to carry noble carries because noble carries were dangerous. From the family, Likwa Sfiso Ndlovu. Likwa.
Good morning to you all. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to the NUST leadership for bestowing such an honor on my father. I would also like to thank NUST for extending and not turning away anyone, which is a true testament that you are celebrating a simple man who embraced all. In particular, I would like to extend my gratitude to the acting Vice-Chancellor, Professor Swanda, for the support which we all know started a long time ago. We vividly remember the support you provided when Dad had a car accident some years ago, and how you always welcomed us into your office whenever we visited, and we thank you. We are Christians, and when someone passes, it is simply because their time has come. God has a plan for us all, and when His will is done, we should not find fault among ourselves. That should be said for the case of my father. For the record, NUST did not kill our dad. We were deeply saddened by the misinformation and the rumors in the midst of such tragic events. I would also like to thank my family for the continuous support you have all given in ensuring that Dad's legacy lives on. In particular, I would like to thank my grandfather, who in honor of Dad's efforts and contributions to education, has decided that one of the schools at Denver Township will be named after Professor Lindela Ndlovu. This will be a high school with emphasis on excellence in science. In memory of my father, we are establishing a Lindela Ndlovu Trust, which will host an annual lecture in his name where all his former students can continue his legacy. As a family, we are grateful to Dad's mentor, Professor Rukuni, and Dad's students, Dr. Hove and Professor Mafongoya, who have championed his vision. To my blessed mother, you are God sent. To my brother Lindumuzi and my sister Lindelwe, I thank you for the opportunity to serve as the family spokesperson. I would like to share a reading that deeply resonates with me and hopefully can offer some comfort to all those that knew my father. I'm getting old, and what that means is I've survived, so far. But a lot of people I've loved and known did not. I've lost friends, best friends, acquaintances, co-workers, grandparents, fathers, relatives, teachers, students, and a host of other people. But here's my 2 cents. I wish I could tell you you get used to people dying. I never did. And frankly, I don't think I want to. It tears a hole through me whenever someone I love dies. and no matter the circumstance. But I don't want it to not matter. I don't want it to be something that just passes. My scars are a testament to the love that I had for that person. And if the scar is deep, then so is the love. So be it. Scars are a testament to life. Scars are a testament that I can love deeply and live deeply and be cut or even gorged, and that I can heal and continue to live and continue to love. You should notice that scar tissue is stronger than the original skin ever was. Scars are a testament to life. Scars are only ugly to those that can't see or those that haven't got scars of their own. As for grief, you'll find it comes in waves. When the ship is first wrecked, you're drowning, with the wreckage all around you. Everything floating around you reminds you of the beauty and the magnificence of the ship that once was and is no more. And all you can do is float. You find some piece of the wreckage and you'll hang on for a while. Maybe it's something physical. Maybe a happy memory, a photograph. Maybe it's a person who's also floating. But for a while, all you can do is float and stay alive. In the beginning, the waves come 100 meters tall and they crash over you without mercy. They come 10 seconds apart and they don't even give you a time to catch your breath. All you can do is hang on and float. But after a while, maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe years, you'll find that the waves are still 100 meters tall, but they come further apart. When they come, they still crash over you, but in between, you can still breathe, you can function. And you never know what's going to trigger grief. It might be a song, a picture, a street intersection, the smell of coffee. It could be about anything. And the waves still come crashing, but in between there is life. Somewhere down the line, and it's different for everybody, you find that the waves are only 80 meters tall, 50, then 30. And while they still come, they come further apart. You can see them coming for the most part. An anniversary, landing at the airport, even Christmas. And for the most part, you'll prepare yourself. And when it washes over you, you know that you'll come out the other side, drenched in water, soaking wet, sputtering and still hanging on to some piece of the wreckage, but you know you'll come out. The waves never stop coming, and somehow you don't really want them to. But you'll learn that you'll survive them. Other waves will come, and you will survive those too. And if you're lucky, you'll have lots of waves, lots of deep scars, lots of lost loved ones, and lots of ships. I thank you all.
I think give the young men a standing ovation. Cela sisukume, and clap hands for the young men. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. You may take your seats. I like the clarity, the depth of thought, the conciseness, and also less than 10 minutes. We had allocated him 10 minutes. He spoke less than 10 minutes. So may the speakers that follow after him learn from him. When we've allocated 10 minutes for you, that's a suggestion as to the maximum. If you take less than 10 minutes, that will be good. Mr. Mzue.
Thank you. The guest of honor, all dignitaries from the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development, government and local authorities, officials from all state universities and academic institutions present, the chairman of the NAST Council members, the acting vice chancellor, the acting pro vice chancellor, and all NAST principal officers, all NAST academic and support staff here present. I humbly extend my greetings to you all. I also extend my most humble greetings to the Ndlovu family and Professor Lindela Ndlovu's friends and associates. Today marks the first commemoration of the academic legacy of our late former Vice Chancellor, Professor Lindela Ndlovu. It has been a year now after the passing away of a luminary, an academic of notable worth, a well-published scholar whose academic work is alive even up to today. It is with a heavy heart, yet with great pride and humility also, what an oxymoron, that I stand before you to speak about the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu. I'm sure there are many people here who are going to talk about his academic legacy, the academic work that he did, and the papers that he published. I have therefore decided to focus on the unique relationship that we had with Professor Ndlovu as NAST academics. To those who don't know, I, Alois Mujwe, I'm the president of the National University of Science and Technology Educators Association, NASTEDA, a registered trade union representing academic members of staff. My memories of Professor Lindela Ndlovu are as vivid as yesterday, considering that in all meetings on matters affecting NAST academics, it was unavoidable to speak to him. One thing for sure, Professor Lindela Ndlovu was always prepared to lend an ear to NAST academics representatives. If you are a farmer and you have a cow that gives you milk and manure, it becomes certain that the cow also expects to be fed. Its trough should be kept full and should always be taken to the river in order for it to drink water. The animal surely needs to also be taken to the deep tank in order for all ticks to fall off. Given that care, this animal will be healthy and it will be productive. Regardless of the financial challenges bedeviling NAST, Professor Lindela Ndlovu was like the owner of a lone cow that he took care of, sometimes with reservations, sometimes with contestation, but he would try to look after academics and to take care of our welfare. As academics, we managed to chart the way forward on extra loads with Professor Lindela Ndlovu. To him, it didn't make sense that lecturers in understaffed departments were supposed to take extra courses for no payment at all. He understood that they needed to be motivated to carry the loads of workers who were not there in a context of frozen posts and failure by the university to attract academic members of staff from overseas and nearby countries due to salaries that are currently below regional average. We will forever cherish the uncontested Christmas parties and long service awards, as well as the Vice Chancellor's games that allowed us to have a high morale and to bond as NAST academics, support staff, and our students. Professor Lindela Ndlovu viewed NAST staff as one family with no differences in color, height, and more so language. This legacy should be upheld. The car loan scheme for NAST academics was presented to council and it became policy following the NASTEDA executive's presentation of the car loan scheme proposal to Professor Ndlovu. As a result, some academic members of staff were able to purchase cars that lived up to their imaginations. Professor Ndlovu was also agreeable to the establishment of a senior common room at NUST. After academic members of staff noted that NUST was the only university in Zimbabwe without a decent leisure and fellowship facility run by academics and senior managers, Professor Ndlovu bemoaned the fact that university committees that were supposed to initiate and sustain this project had failed to do so, and he allowed academic members of staff to unite with serial support staff to establish this facility. The day the senior common room was launched, academic members of staff were graced by Professor Lindela Ndlovu's presence. His aura as a fatherly figure was felt by everyone present. Academics and senior managers danced the night away with the professor, far from pressures of academic life and yet so near to those pressures. Today, the NUST Senior Common Room is part of the legacy and gift left to NUST by Professor Lindela Ndlovu. Most of us have developed great confidence in our work because of the interactions we had with Professor Lindela Ndlovu. He was a man who fought to ensure that NUST academics would be highly interested in research. I remember one moment where we clashed highly. He looked at me and said, "Your problem is that you always come here demanding higher rates for claims, and you claim that you are overloaded with work. Yet I am not seeing your research outputs. Where are your publications?" That was a challenge that stands even up to today. The interesting thing about Professor Lindela Ndlovu is that he was one man who bore no grudge with anyone. No matter how we argued, begged to differ from each other, and so forth, the next day would always be a new day. He would not engage on a witch-hunting exercise just because you differed with him the other day. As NUST academic representatives, we're always humbled by Professor Lindela Ndlovu's professionalism and sincerity. At one point in time, there was a concern raised about a chairperson of a department who wanted to make academic members of staff sign logbooks upon arrival at work and upon departure. We went to Professor Lindela Ndlovu to pick up his brains on this issue. And he said to us, "Guys, academic members of staff are supposed to be out there researching. Unless, of course, where they are expected to be attending department or university committee meetings. Or unless where they are supposed to be in class with students. Let's not talk about this issue. Don't worry about it. This is a university, not a high school. Unfortunately, some people think they are headmasters, while others think they are senior masters at a boarding school. But don't worry about it. Just go and do your work." Professor Lindela also affectionately, all right, allow me to repeat. Professor Lindela also affectionately called Bralins. As most of you would remember him, was an academic godfather. He was our guy and we sadly miss him. He was a leader, not a boss. May his dear departed soul rest in peace. I'm sure wherever he is, he's watching us and smiling as we celebrate his academic legacy and reflect on the kind of relationship we had with him. Errors could have been done. Erratic is human. Today, may I urge all the NUST community to unite and carry on with all the work left unfinished by the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu and take NUST to the greater heights so that it becomes the world-class center for higher learning. Let us keep perfecting all the imperfections. I can go on and on and on talking about this great man and well-published academic work, but let me make way for other speakers. I thank you.
Thank you, Mzue. Can you give him another pam-pam? Prof Menje, a professor, was exercising on his bicycle in the morning, and a car knocked his bicycle down. He was not injured, but he was shaken. And when the police arrived, they asked, what was the color of the car? Which direction was it? What speed do you think it was doing? And then the police say, did you by any chance spot his registration number plate? And the professor says, I can't really remember, but all I know is that when I looked at the car as it was disappearing, is that the tangent of the number is the same as the cosine with the digits reversed. And the policeman said, oh yeah, I understand. Professor Mwenje, can you come and tell us more about cosines?
Thank you very much, the Director of Ceremonies, Mr. Moyo, and thank you for allowing me to escape afterwards for the other function. Allow me to recognize the Acting Vice Chancellor of the National University of Science and Technology, Professor Samson Sibanda, the guest of honor and founding Vice Chancellor of the National University of Science and Technology, Professor Phineas Makurane, the family of the late Professor Ndlovu, the Acting Pro-Vice Chancellor of the National University of Science and Technology, Dr. Dumisani J. Tlatuayo, and other principal officers here present, Vice Chancellors of other universities here present, friends of Professor Ndlovu. I also wish to acknowledge his mentor and friend, Professor Rukuni, who is here present, and also other members of parastatals that he chaired that I saw present in this place. Let me also acknowledge the former NAST council members, NAST members of staff and students here present, the Bulawayo community, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Zimbabwe University Vice Chancellors Association, ZUFCA, it is my singular privilege and honor to give a few remarks on this day in remembrance of a colleague, an academic par excellence, an administrator, and the former Vice Chancellor of the National University of Science and Technology, Professor Lindela Ndlovu. Allow me to thank the NAS community and management and the family of the late Professor Ndlovu for organizing this commemoration event. I know that each of my Vice Chancellor colleagues would have loved to say a word or two about the late Professor Ndlovu because he has touched quite a number of lives. He was a colleague indeed, and was accepted among us as a seasoned academic leader. However, I'm privileged as the chairman of the Zimbabwe Vice Chancellors Association to say a few remarks. And also, I'm qualified indeed as someone who worked with Professor Ndlovu for over a period of 13 years. I first knew him from the University of Zimbabwe, but I worked with him, under him, for a period of 13 years. And I can concur with a number of the things that have been said here. Indeed, he was an incredible leader, and we learned quite a lot from him. One of the things that you learn in life is that you may not value those that are around you, those in fact who lead you, but the moment you are taken away from them, you just see that the decisions that you take, you begin to reflect on the leaders that went before you. You take their examples and what they did. It helps quite a lot. I still remember that he used, as we worked with him, He just used to say for Professor Makurane, my mentor, my mentor. He learned a lot of things from Professor Makurane. We learned a lot of things from him because we worked directly with him. So you find yourself in a matter of the decisions that you take on an everyday life, especially the life of a vice-chancellor is quite a lonely life. You deal with so many issues that affect people's lives, and it's not easy, but we had such a person. I believe that, as a matter of fact, during the greater part of those 13 years, he mentored me. But not only me, I think you heard Kathy talk that quite a number of vice-chancellors who have come from this institute and other vice-chancellors from other institutions as well have benefited from his leadership. So we observed what he did and took for ourselves what we thought was helpful. We thank him for being that academic leader and administrator who assisted us in our careers. Professor Ndlovu was approachable, and a number of vice-chancellors, including me, sought his wisdom and advice. Professor Ndlovu was at one time the chairman of ZUFCA for many years, and together with Professor Ngwabi Bebe, he laid the foundation for the Zimbabwe Research and Education Network called ZIMREN. This network will benefit all research and educational institutions across the country. We've just appointed a director to spearhead this project, and we believe that next year it should make a difference, you know, to the whole country. I have to say that Professor Ndlovu and Professor Ngwabi Bebe were really the people who spearheaded this project, and indeed we will see to it that, you know, it will continue. So Professor Ndlovu was an important pillar in ZUFCA. He mixed well with the young vice-chancellors as well as the older ones. He played an important role as he was well understood by both zones. His academic contributions to the nation and the international community are there for all to see, and I don't have to articulate any of this. As the community of vice-chancellors in Zimbabwe, we have fond memories of Professor Ndlovu. He argued his thoughts very well. And if he would speak, you know that he has got a good point. I have to say that I don't remember him as a good storyteller. Maybe for those who mixed with him outside university circles may understand him as a storyteller. But one thing that I know about him is he was a good listener. And he was fair, and he was understanding. I still remember very much as a dean, and as a dean of deans, chairman of deans over here, dealing with staff, even some staff that had problems and the like. You know, you really understood that Professor Ndlovu was very much understanding. He was understanding. He argued his thoughts very well. So to sum it all, I would say I knew him as an academic leader and administrator and a researcher par excellence. And he was fair and he was understanding. We will also miss his deep voice on the phone. Whenever you gave him a telephone call, he would answer, Ndlovu. You know, and he would listen to what you have to say. Allow me again on behalf of ZUFCA to thank you most profusely, the family of the late Professor Ndlovu and the NAS management for holding this event. I believe that it gives a befitting honor to a great academic, researcher, and leader. Let me say the Vice-Chancellor's contributions are immense and immeasurable. We cannot even sit here to try to say what he has done. He has affected communities because by nature you have to do external jobs even to the university that you work for. And therefore it will be humbling to start to mention some of the things that he has done The same applies to those who have been vice chancellors. It is just beyond what you can imagine. His contributions are immense and immeasurable. So were his contributions. So finally, on behalf of ZUFCA, I wish to thank you all for gracing this event. May God bless you. I thank you.
Professor Monje forgot to mention, Monje, lalela ngapha. He forgot to mention that at that stage of Zimren and all those complicated things, I was secretary of ZUFCA, and there was a problem. They were using so many funny terms. I remember one time I wrote some of the terms in the way that I understood them. That made sense to me. And Professor Beba said, no. You're supposed to be a University of Science and Technology. These are science things. I said, yes, but science don't write minutes. Thank you. Professor Monje is requested to go, he can go. Thank you, we'll allow you to go. We now call upon the council representative, the interim, Ubaba, Ambassador Zenzo Simbi.
Good afternoon to everybody. I'll start by greeting deliberately. May I recognize the following: the representatives of the NAS Council or the previous NAS Council who are here present, Acting Vice Chancellor of NAST, Professor Samson Sibanda, Vice Chancellors from sister universities, all NAST principal officers and their deputies, Professor Makurani, here present, all NAST directors, members of NAST staff here present, representatives of the Zimbabwe Vice Chancellors Association, business associates of the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu, with particular emphasis to the family of the late Lindela Ndlovu, and a thank you to the young man for that eloquent speech. Former students and friends of the late Ndlovu, captains of industry, NAS students led by the SRC president, ladies and gentlemen. I see on the program I am supposed to be speaking on behalf of NAS Council. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends, I chaired the last interim NAS Council. That is all. However, now that I was asked to come, and I know all of you, I knew Professor Lindela Ndlovu very well, and above all, I have a suicidal passion for NAST. Therefore, now that I was asked to come and speak, I will speak. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all former councillors or immediate past councillors who worked so hard to ensure that this commemoration happens. When Professor Ndlovu received the baton stroke of Vice Chancellorship from Professor Makurane, many of us held our breaths with anxiety because we felt that the university was not yet ready for the change. To put it correctly, we feared that the departure of Professor Makurane would erode the character of NAST that was taking shape nicely. As things turned out, Professor Ndlovu proved us wrong. He proved his critics wrong. He stood up to the challenge, grabbed the bull by the horns, and acquitted himself exceptionally well. To use the performance lingua, Professor Lindela Ndlovu hit the ground running. He just fitted in not only maintained NAST as we knew it, but also introduced additional facets at academic development and the linkage levels. Under his leadership, NAST continued to grow, and NAST rapidly claimed more space within the fraternity of institutions of higher learning at national, regional, and international levels. Those of us who follow the mention of NAST in the media read about the many awards that NAST won almost every year. We read about the research awards. On awards, we were pleasantly surprised to read that Professor Ndlovu himself was frequently among those that were researchers who won those awards. Ladies and gentlemen, this is more than proverbial leadership, but by example. I always attended ZITF and witnessed NAST coming out best among institutions of higher learning for 4 or so years, and thanks to Professor Lindela. Of particular note and exemplary concern for us, for this region, is NAST Schools Enrichment Program, NAST, known as the NAST SEP, that LR, as he was commonly known, introduced to assist schools in Matebeleland in the teaching of STEM subjects. It began with the teaching of mathematics, and I am told that it has now spread to the other STEM subjects. Here was a practical man who believed not in complaining about problems, but in providing a solution. I am also told that this program has now spread to the Midlands province. And I'm aware that a number of councillors felt it should spread nationally. Our country needs the people who can provide solutions, not people who describe in detail how defeating problems are, and after that cry. Now you see, Professor Makurane, that you left NAST in capable hands. When you handed it over to LR, as he was affectionately called. In my capacity as the past interim chairman of NAST Council, and as a good citizen of Bulawayo, and a responsible citizen of Zimbabwe, I am here to express our solidarity to Professor Ndlovu's family, with the Office of the Acting Vice Chancellor, and with the Office of the Registrar, and with the entire NAST community. That includes the students. We are together when we cheered Professor Ndlovu. We were together when we cheered Professor Ndlovu on as he made his achievements. We are together when we were together when we mourned his passing, and we are together as we go through these commemorations. May his soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much. Can you give him another pam-pam? Umkati. Umkati, bati bafuna ukugida amajukwa. No, amabhiza. Is that what you said? Okay. As I call on the former students, ngifuna ukuzwa ukuthi uLikho Ncube ukhona. Oh yeah, hayi ukhona, very good. Dlamini, as you come forward, do we have any other speaker on the former students? Can you raise your hand? There's supposed to be 2 people. Gone once. Are there any other speakers? Gone twice. Any other speakers? Gone a 3rd time and final. Dlamini.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. I am Zephaniah Dlamini, one of Professor Lindela Ndlovu's former students. But today I stand here as a replacement or substitute speaker, and I'm supposed to give an account of Professor Ndlovu's academic achievements. According to our program, this lot was supposed to be taken by one of Professor Ndlovu's former students, Mr. Tabane Maposa, who is currently based in Washington, D.C., where he is working as a partnership leader for the food assistance program with Vision International. Mr. Maposa was supposed to depart from Washington, D.C. on Saturday and attend this function. Unfortunately, the Dulles International Airport canceled all flights due to excessive ice on its runways, thus he could not travel. So I stand here to represent Professor Ndlovu's former students and also fill in what was supposed to be the lecture. But it won't be a lecture, I will only chronicle Professor Ndlovu's achievements from the perspective of his former students. All protocol observed. I would like to thank NAST who have given us this opportunity to reflect on and applaud an academic giant who so many like myself are greatly indebted to. I stand here as one of his countless beneficiaries, and I'll try to summarize his academic pursuits. Professor Ndlovu was an academic leader who contributed immensely to agricultural research in general and animal sciences in particular. Professor Ndlovu taught undergraduate programs in biochemistry, animal nutrition, animal production, focusing on small ruminants, poultry, draft animals, and beef. He personally taught me biochemistry. All the biochemistry that I know and I teach today, I was taught by Professor Ndlovu. He also taught at postgraduate level, where he taught nutritional biochemistry, advanced animal nutrition research techniques, and digestive physiology at postgraduate level. Professor Ndlovu has supervised over 100 Bachelor of Science honors projects, over 30 Master of Science projects, and over 15 PhD projects. Most of his PhD students have gone on to become established professional animal scientists in international and government research institutes, as well as universities and the private sector. His research has involved developing strategies that are economic and sustainable for rural farming households who have limited resources, especially in the area of animal feed resources, evaluation, and feeding systems. In carrying out his research, Professor Ndlovu focused on technologies suitable for farmers with limited financial resources. This research, as we have heard from earlier speakers, has resulted in over 70 publications in refereed journals of international repute, 3 books and 30 book chapters, including 3 invitational chapters. Professor Ndlovu has served as a guest editor for a special volume on tannins for the Animal Feed Science and Technology Journal, and served on the editorial board of the same journal between 2001 and 2003. Professor Ndlovu's academic record is impressive as far as numbers are concerned. He had 4 times the number of papers one needs to be promoted to the grade of full professor. Now, what about the quality of his publications? Judging the quality of an academic's research output is not an easy task. The best way to access, or rather to assess how other researchers refer to one's work is through the use of what is called the H index. There are people like librarians who actually make a living by counting publications and their citations. This is called bibliometrics. Now, if we look at this approach, the H index, as an unbiased assessment tool that is now commonly used to assess the research impact of a scholar and try to see how Professor Ndlovu fared in that assessment. So this H index is the number of papers by an author that have each been cited 8 times. Professor Ndlovu has an impressive H index of 18, meaning he has, of his papers, 18 of them have each been cited 18 times. He also has another sub-index to the H index, which is called the I-10 index, which means of all these 139 publications, how many have been cited at least 10 times? He has 42 papers that have each been cited 10 times. He has 42 of them. And that is the highest in the country, not just in animal sciences. His publications have been cited, we heard from the librarian in the morning, Ms. Matsikumakelwanewake. His publications have been cited 1,156 times as of this morning. Since he is passing on, I was checking his profile, over 200 citations of his work have gone through. So with 1,156 citations, he was the leading person here at NAST. For instance, here at NAST, the most highly cited academic, the one that follows him, only has 345 citations. And at the University of Zimbabwe, the highly cited academic has 709 citations. And Professor Ndlovu is sitting at 1,156. Among his peers, that is the past and present vice chancellors, they have indices, H indices, ranging between 2 and 10. Need I say more about Professor Ndlovu's sterling academic achievements? No, the figures are just too impressive. While he was alive, we all know Professor Ndlovu received numerous awards for his sterling research outputs, and these include the International Foundation for Science and Danita Award for Excellence in Smallholder Livestock Research in 1998, the University of the North Distinguished Science Researcher in 2000, the South African Society of Animal Science Gold Medal for Research in 2007, and the Research Council of Zimbabwe Presidential Award for Agricultural Research Animal Science, which was signed and presented to him by His Excellency, the President of the Republic and Chancellor of all our universities, R.G. Mugabe, in 2013. Furthermore, His excellence in research is clearly manifested by the number and value of international competitive research grants that he won over the years. These add up to nearly $3 million US. Few academics can claim such competitiveness in writing grants. These funds assisted create an immense human resource capital, not only in animal science, but in other fields such as agricultural economics, social sciences, and biotechnology. I personally benefited from one of these grants, which funded my visit to the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the US, where I got trained and did my MSc research project in DNA fingerprinting. Because of Professor Ndlovu's great craftsmanship, he got us this kind of funding also to open the first DNA testing facility in the country here at NUST. The man had tremendous foresight. He developed capacity in a technology and only to get it implemented 20 years later. We thank him for that. Right, so what exactly did Professor Ndlovu work on in his research? If, like Ms. Matsika said in the morning, if you go to Google Scholar, not the general Google search engine, but the one dedicated for scholarly work, and type Lindela Ndlovu or LR Ndlovu, you will get an impressive list of publications covering 13 Google pages. In this list, you will find papers on small ruminants research, which cover nutrient intake and utilization. Small ruminants include farm animals such as goats and sheep, not tumbeva, as some UZ engineering students once thought, and they were heard saying that small ruminants are mice or mbeva, when they saw what was written on one of Professor Ndlovu's research vehicles. It was written small ruminants research. So in this area, he evaluated various fodder species such as alfalfa, different acacia or thorny species, and tried to evaluate how they affect the productivity of the goats and sheep. He also worked extensively on condensed tannins or proanthocyanidins and their effect on herbivore nutrition and smallholder agricultural sustainability. Professor Ndlovu also had interest in draft power research, and he modeled draft power traction dynamics using Mashona oxen, the Mashona breed of cattle. So he used the Mashona oxen and donkeys and actually tested his models empirically. He went on to publish a book titled The Performance and Nutritional Management of Draft Cattle in Smallholder Agricultural Systems in Zimbabwe. Professor Ndlovu's work was applied research. He didn't do basic, simple research of counting things like some people do. His work was applied. He has left us an excellent body of knowledge that the scientific community all over the world will treasure for a long time to come. He was an unassuming, hardworking, and humble man. We greatly miss him. May his soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dlamini. Can you give him another big pam-pam? Likwa, likwa.
Suka madoda, awu, uyenze kahle. Yekela ngiqale ngithi mina kulezi zinto ezingane ziqhakathekile lapho kufanele ngizikhulume ngingakathi ukusebenza. Yekela ngiqale ngizibale. Yekela mina ngithi mvumeleni bonke iqhawe. Ubaba uLindela Ndlovu. He was a father, a husband, a brother, a friend, a mentor, an academic, an author, a professor, a professional, an education guru. He was a leader, a scholar, a scientist, a biochemist, an animal scientist. Indeed, he was a livestock scientist. The chairman, the chancellor, the editor, the manager, the teacher. He was indeed a role model. The calm in a storm, a sleeping volcano, an icon of strength, courage, kindness, and love. His name remains the icon of the person he was. A big salute to the legend. He was a unique leader, an inspiration, never hesitant in sharing his wisdom. He gave us great thoughts, for he was great. Ndlovu was a good man who made sure that everyone around him tapped his goodness. He was never perfect, but principled, agile, alert. As a person, he was wonderful. There was a very endearing quality about him. Memories right through the night. Ndlovin, you were right. To better the world was your fight. You were a dreamer and a master of your dreams. You kept your virtue and you never listened to your fears, yet you remained attentive and supportive. Suka madoda, kateni, boyanye benyato obusonga busombuluka. Mbongo kazingelwayo, lina bakaNdlovu zidle ekhaya ngokuswela belusi, zazizeluswa zintombi. Lina bakwaSihlangu sihle, Mthiyane ngokuthiya amadoda emazibukweni. Bakupho Malinga, Ogegane, Omthombeni, Ozingelwayo, Olamula, Ongema, Omdingi, Lisiphila iqhawe. Indlovu enkulu, lapha agcobe khona ubengashiyi ngitsho ubunyonyo. Ubengasindwa ngumboko wakhe. Hawu, suka madoda, iqhawe indoda emadodeni. Isizwe nguwe lo. Suka madoda, likhona. Kufanele libe khona, kufanele ndithwale. Bayethe! Bayethe! Uyazi namhlanje ngiyajabula. Kule ndoda ngathi ngiqala mina into zokwenza izinto zobunkondlo lezi. Ngaqala ngadobhe omunye undoda. Ekela ngishaya uzasale iqedisa. Lwamnandi ulimi sampilo yomlimi, isisinde sempilo, ichoba lomlilo, inhlansi yompaca, igula lomcaba, umsamo woluntu, iziko lesiko, luqukethile ngokwalo luyisicupho, lusingathi zagalugeleza ingoma esihlabusayo. Sanamba ithalo hlabusa, saklekla sabusa ngalo, luyashelela olimini. Nanko phela sisho sithi akubona kuyabocwa uzibani usimbece amanzi ngamayaka umkani ngumcephe odlayo uyancama akahlabeli wenzani angiliswa akahlabeli wenzani suka madoda ngustapetapa induna intombi umthuzwa futhi njalo uma bonabula nje nyoka unangu lamhla engayisiye uma favuke njengedabane bambisa ulikhwa ngumfoka ncube mbongile baba moyo suka madoda.
Yebo kuthiwa akahlabeli uyacula akusimganu ngumcephe. Now we move on to the guest of honor who will be introduced by Professor Samson Sibanda. Darwin.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. My job is a very simple one, to introduce Professor Pierre Makurane, a distinguished academic, the first chairman of the Zimbabwe Council for Higher Education, first Vice Chancellor of the National University of Science and Technology, Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Zimbabwe, and was one of the first Africans to major in physics and mathematics at the University College of Rhodesia in Nyasaland. The first black Zimbabwean to acquire a PhD in the sciences. Was Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland, previously UBBS. Prior to that, he was lecturer of physics in solid state at the University of Zambia, and the year is 1968. And at the same time, 1968, he completed his PhD in solid state physics. A postgraduate holder of a diploma from Uppsala University in 1972. Professor Pierre Makurane, the podium is yours.
Phambili kukalindiwe labantwana bakalindela phambili kwemuli yako Ndlovu ehlezi ngale eceleni lemuli yako Sibanda ngathi kumbe bakhona bonke khona members of council led by the chairperson Ambassador Msimbi, the acting Vice Chancellor of NAS, Professor Samson Sibanda, Vice Chancellors of sister universities who are here. I thought the former Vice Chancellor of MSU was here. Is he here? No. Okay. I've mentioned him anyway, even if he's not here. The deans of NAST, all the principal officers and their deputies, members of NAST staff, members of the Zimbabwe Vice Chancellors Association, ZUFCA, which I formed, business associates of the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu, former students and friends of the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu, captains of industry who are here present, NAS students led by the SRC president. I don't know whether he's here. Is he here? The SRC president? No. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here this morning to celebrate the academic legacy. Yesterday, somebody was trying to translate this word legacy and he failed, and I don't even know how you translate it into Sindebele, but anyway, the academic legacy of a well-lived life of the late Professor Lindela Ndlovu. Today is not a day of mourning, but a day to celebrate a life that achieved a lot, a life that touched the lives of many, a life that disappeared from this earth in a rather sudden manner. We cannot say that he left the country, he left us in a hurry, but we can correctly aver that his overnight departure surprised all of us who knew him. In fact, I should say, shocked all of us who knew him. When I listened to the people talk about the death on that day when the news broke out about the sudden disappearance, many people had their own paragraphs, their own stories, or some shock to share. There are those who had talked to the late and shared lighter moments with him 2 days earlier. There are those who had laughed with him a day earlier. And there are even those who disclosed in shock and utter disbelief that they had been with him only hours prior to his to his last breath. The stories of incredulous expressions might be many, but the sum total of it all is that everyone knew him, was left clutching at the incomprehensibles. I felt I should spend just a few minutes reminiscing on this to all of us, because I felt I needed to share the unbelievable situation with all of you as we celebrate his life. It is quite possible, I know, that I might be expressing what a number of you here felt on the day of the mourning. I'm happy, though, that the acting Vice-Chancellor, Professor Samson Sibanda, and his team saw it fit to hold this commemoration. Those of us in academia, in the academic world, if that is, must develop a tradition to celebrate the legacies of our late colleagues. Other sectors do it. The religious sector does it. The sports sector does it. The music and arts, in business, you name it. And of course also even in politics. Academics should not be left behind. We should not be shy to celebrate the lives of our departed colleagues. Now let me tell you that I first met Lindela long before he came to the university, to Zimbabwe. During the diaspora, when people were fighting all over the place, I was running a program, a scholarship program for Zimbabweans, South Africans, and a lot of other people like that. And this program was taking students from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, and from Lesotho even, and sending them to the rest of Africa. I did not encounter Lindela at that time, but he was sponsored by one of the organizations that I worked with, and they sent him to Sierra Leone. I was then at the University of Zambia. After Sierra Leone, Lindela went to Canada. And you won't believe it, when I visited Canada, and I was then Pro-Vice Chancellor at the University of Zimbabwe, I heard about this brilliant Zimbabwean student who was studying in Canada. A friend of ours, the late James Moyo, who was in Toronto, agreed to take me to Guelph, where Lindela was studying. And I wanted just to check whether Lindela could, after completing his studies at Guelph, agree to come and join us at UZ. And so we drove from Toronto to Guelph, and we saw Lindela and spent quite a good time with him. And I provoked him that he should come to Zimbabwe after completing his studies. And indeed, a year or two later, he joined us at the University of Zimbabwe. He was then just a lecturer, and he grew through the ranks to become a senior lecturer, a reader, and eventually he became an associate professor and a professor. I want here to recognize Professor Mandibamba Rukuni, who is here, who one could say was Lindela's mentor at the University of Zimbabwe. He belongs to a generation just below mine, but above Lindela's generation. And so he worked at the University of Zimbabwe in the Faculty of Agriculture under Rukuni, and eventually became Rukuni's deputy as dean. And when Rukuni retired, he took over as dean of the Faculty of Agriculture. I then also got to know Lindela as a researcher when he was a member of staff at UZ. And he was interested in small animals. You know, Africans, we were not very interested in goats and small animals like that. But he was interested in them. He had a goat project down in Gwanda South. And one day when I visited him, I realized that he was very, very keen in doing that. Later on, Lindela decided to take sabbatical leave or whatever it was at the University of the North, which is now called University of Limpopo, in Polokwane, South Africa. I was impressed by the quick way in which he was adjusting things. And so, when we at NAST lost our Pro-Vice Chancellor, very brilliant guy, Clever Nyati, who was my deputy for 7 years. When Clever left the university, we started seeking or looking for another Pro-Vice Chancellor. And eventually we found Lindela in South Africa and managed to bring him here. We interviewed him and we offered him the job of Pro-Vice Chancellor here at NAST. A look at Professor Ndlovu's academic life shows that in his academic career, he began in December 1989 when he became coordinator of the MSc program in animal science at the University of Zimbabwe. From then on, he never looked back. Animal science became his undisputable forte. As he rose through the animal science ranks as lecturer, senior lecturer, associate professor, and then eventually dean at the University of Zimbabwe. I already mentioned the name of Rukuni, who was his mentor, and therefore I think Rukuni should be recognized as one person who contributed a lot to the development, academic development of Lindela. I also noticed that, I think I noticed Zinyemba here. Is he around? I thought I saw Zinyemba. Yeah, okay, Zinyemba. That time when Lindela was growing through the ranks, Zinyemba was our registrar at the University of Zimbabwe. So, after he went for sabbatical in South Africa, his ascendancy path, first as Pro-Vice Chancellor and eventually as Professor, was made. When he was inaugurated here, when I retired as Vice Chancellor, let me say, when I retired as Vice Chancellor of NAST, I handed over to Lindela. And I remember clearly on that day when he was installed as Vice Chancellor, that his son, who was then a little boy, I think he was only 4 or 5 years old at that time, his son felt for me, you know. So he said to the father, Baba, kanti manje uthathela ukhulu umsebenzi uthi yena uza kudlala. And he just said, no, ukhulu usedlile. Ukhulu usedlile. So that was the end of that. So Lindela became a STEM man who lived STEM academic life. I know that there's a lot of talk about current Minister of Higher Education talking about STEM and so forth. And they declared the National University of Science and Technology the mother of STEM in Zimbabwe. This is what we have gathered here to celebrate the achievements of a STEM cadre. Professor Lindela Ndlovu lived a life of research. You've already heard a lot of talk by people who spoke here before me. I want first of all to say I am associating entirely with all the speeches that were made, and I can guarantee you that they are all true. Even the speech of the ambassador who came to NAST long after that. But he was a man of STEM. Going through the litany of his research topics, I was struck by the following. 1, interactions between nutrition and heat stress on work output in drought animals. 2, interaction between nutrition and reproductive performance of small ruminants. 3, nutritive value and utilization of indigenous and exotic browse tree in Zimbabwe. 4, improving utilization of poor quality refuges through low technological process. 5, improving productivity of small ruminants in the communal areas of Zimbabwe. 6, the ecological biochemistry of proanthocyanin and related flavonoids in the small-scale farming system in semi-arid areas in Zimbabwe. 7, crop-livestock interaction. 8, mineral status of livestock and herbage in communal areas. 9, nutritional control of heat stress in poultry. 10, nutrient utilization in indigenous chickens. 11, smallholder poultry production. Now, all these things that you can see are in the small animal area. And I'm sure I've just picked a few of the topics that he was interested in. And that's why we called him the STEM person, because he was so interested in these things. Now, he clearly had a calling towards animal science, more like the nutrition of animals, especially the nutrition of small ruminants. He jokingly used to make reference to this fact by making a correction that by small ruminants, this does not confine him to the research interested only in rats and mice. He was not just interested in rats and mice, but you know, rats and mice are very useful for human research. You know, most medical developments start with rats and then they move on to pets, to human beings. Professor Lindela Ndlovu also did a lot of consultancy work in animal science. He did consultancy work for the following organizations. I can just name a few. ADA, which is the Agricultural Rural Development Agency. FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. Regional Dairy Development Training Team. The UNDP Consultative Group for International Agriculture Research in Nairobi and Kenya. Foundation of Research and Development, the International Foundation of Science in Sweden. Incidentally, I handed over the International Development Foundation for Science to him when I was getting on in time. And the Animal Science and Technology Journal. So all of these things Lindela was very interested in doing. Professor Lindela Ndlovu was also a teacher par excellence. He taught master's degree students, that is in addition to undergraduates. He taught master's degree students and he supervised students in the areas of MPhil, Master of Philosophy, and PhD. A quick survey shows that he taught and supervised a total of 53, I think it was made out of the figures that I'm quoting, was quoted by somebody else earlier. 53 master's science students, MPhil students, and PhD candidates, who all successfully completed their thesis. The numbers might be slightly more than this, but this is what I was made aware of, and that is what I was sure of. Notable is the fact that he supervised more than 18 PhD students. If each of the 18 PhD students had also produced 18 more PhD students, you can see the world would have been infested with PhDs as well. Incidentally, as the acting Vice Chancellor noted, there was a time when I was the only science PhD in this country, following on Chizero, who was a PhD in economics. So you can see that now PhD is commonplace. Everybody has got a PhD now. Huh? Everybody has a PhD. There was a time when there was there was a time when there was only 1 or 2 people around with the thing. Right. Now, so if, as I was saying, if all these 18 PhD students had also produced 18 students of their own with PhD, you can see you can imagine what would have been happening. Now, if we applied the same supposition to his MPhils and MScs, then Prof. Lindela Ndlovu is responsible for an academic snowball, and the effect would forever be felt to the end of time. Professor Lindela Ndlovu became external examiner of more than 14 universities in at least 5 countries around the world. Now, for some statistics, Professor Lindela Ndlovu achieved 25 awards from institutions, bodies, and organizations around the world. He became a member of 15 professional societies. He boasted of a membership of or involved in 13 non-profit making organizations. As a member of boards of directors, he sat on more than 8 boards, including that of being member of council of the University of Zambia. He even chaired a lot of those boards. Some of you will probably know that Lindela Ndlovu also chaired the Cold Storage Company of Zimbabwe. He produced 80 plus refereed publications. He co-authored 3 books. LR, as we effectively refer to him, contributed book chapters to 30 reference books. He presented more than 30 conference papers. Ladies and gentlemen, the liturgy is endless. I could go on and on and on talking about the work that Lindela did. As STEM professor, you know, we really applaud the work that he has done. So this is indeed a very impressive body of academic statistics. Yes, it was achieved by one man, Lindela Ndlovu. In conclusion, let me depart a little bit from the Lindela story to make an appeal concerning the construction program at NAST. There appears to be no progress here. When I left, there were cranes kissing the sky. Lindela took over those cranes kissing the sky. And he now left those cranes still kissing the sky. So I even led a drive when I was Vice Chancellor here to get a lot of science equipment from Philip Harris in London. However, I left the university in 2004, and things have not moved up to now. When I come to the campus here, the only thing I can see is this sky. You know, you can see the stars up at the top. You can see the stars. But I must apologize a little bit about these stars, in that our architect, Mr. Eugene Mercury, unfortunately was killed by robbers before he finished this building. That's why there is so poor acoustics in this sound. A lot of you, I think, you're could hear you laughing and enjoying yourself, which means you were hearing what was going on. But the acoustics of this building are really letting us down. And so we hope that Professor Spanda, one of these days you can get some architects who can pad off all these beautiful things and make them a little bit more acoustic friendly. Otherwise, the whole thing is not there. I don't know who I am making this appeal to. But I hope that somebody out there will hear this distress call and take some action. I thank you.
I think we would like to appeal to the media here to take this distress call to the other people who might, can we give the guest of honor a big round of applause? A big round of applause. For those who were attending admin during his days will know that we have a manager, a leader, a wise man. I think who's there now? Matsika. I think it's only Matsika and I who used to attend your admin meetings, who are still here. I think we're beginning to look like the furniture here. Yeah, it's Matsika and I who used to be in your admin meetings, who are still here at NAST. But Baba Makurani, I'll tell you, I know you like humor. A farmer was retiring, and as the employers at the farm were deciding what to give the man, the animals also felt they would miss him. So they too held their own meetings. We will give him eggs. They all clapped hands. Yes, that's a brilliant idea. We'll give him manure for his garden because we know he's a good farmer. We'll give him milk. And then one of the animals suggests, we'll give him bacon as well. I think we should give him bacon. The eggs can't go without bacon. And the pigs said, no, that's not a good idea. That's not a good idea. He said, yes. The hens say, but you are giving him eggs. The cows say, we'll be giving him milk. And all the animals say, even our manure, we'll be giving manure. And the pig said, now listen. When you give him eggs, when you give him manure, when you give him milk, you are participating in his retirement. But in order for him to get bacon, we will have to be involved. So the difference between involvement and participation. But I want to say to you, Professor Makurani, you retired, but you are still involved at NAST. I see you there. When I attend the PhD vivas there, I see you there. I see you talking to people, and you're always punctual. That's what we should learn from you. You are always punctual, and you are there commenting. And you always worry me when you meet me and say, Felix, what's going on with development? Tell so and so and tell so and so that we need science, we need labs. I'm small, Baba. I can tell to a certain level, but I can't go beyond. But anyway, you are still involved. I want to thank you very much for that. Can you give me a very big pam-pam? Umkati, umkati, umkati. Kuthiwa chayani one more. Hey, kuthiwa chayani one more. Hey, leader, wena okhokhelayo kuthiwa chayani one more. Just one more. A request kuthiwa just one more. Yes. Chani U10 khona. Nxa kade lingaplananga, we'll see how intelligent you are. Just one more. Siyabonga, 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 siyabonga. Izandla. Yeah, I think it was punishment to me for calling them back. I had to come up here. But you see, I was
Ndlovu family members who are present here, the guest of honor, Professor Makurane, who has been former Vice Chancellor of NAST, and we are still happy to have him as our adjunct professor in the university. The acting Vice Chancellor of NAST, Professor S. Banda, the
chair, the former NAST Council, Ambassador Simbi, the ZUFCA members who are present here, representatives of vice chancellors from our sister universities present here, and officials from our parent ministry, and indeed all government officers who are present. NAST principal officers who are present, all academics and our support staff, researchers, comrades and friends, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Lindela Ndlovu was an administrator as well as a manager. He got a number of notable awards as a manager and administrator. And there is one thing that Professor Lindela was gifted of. He always had the doors to his office open. You know, unfortunately, when you get to such a high position, you sometimes do not manage your own affairs. You end up with people managing your activities. And so in like manner, Professor Ndlovu had a PA. And there is one thing which I want to tell you about PAs. PAs will tell you when you want to see the individual that he is not present, he is in a meeting. When in reality, he is sitting on his table in front of his desk. And because of the amount of work that the person will be having, they are forced to tell you that come later or make an appointment later. But with Professor Ndlovu, having an open door policy, some of the things were unorthodox which we were doing with him. We would wait until the PA goes away. And when the PA goes away, we know that he is still working in his office after hours. Just pick up the phone from your office and phone him. On the other hand, you will hear him answering. And there you are.